boys and girls, we know that for any object that move in a circular motion, they will experience a centripetal accelerations. So according to Newton's second law, when there is an acceleration, there must be a net force that causes the acceleration towards the center of the circle in circular motions. So the net force that causes the object to accelerate towards the center of the circle is what we call centripetal force, Fc. So the centripetal force is the net force in the directions that causes circular motion. In directions means this net force is always point towards the center of the circle. But then we have to remember, centripetal force is not a new kind of forces. Okay? But any force or component forces that act in the directions towards the center of the circle can be our centripetal force. So, our centripetal force or the net force can be weight, normal, tension, frictional force, or any combinations of these forces. So, it is never exists in our free body diagram. You have to bear in mind, we won't draw our centripetal force in free body diagram. But class, in order to solve any problem that related to circular motions, we have to determine or we have to able to identify what is the centripetal force in that particular situation. So, to do that, we need to first draw the FBD and then we sum the forces in the directions. The sum of these forces is what we call the net force in the directions will be our centripetal force. So, we find out that force is a vector quantities. So, in order to be easiest for us to write the sum of the forces in the directions, so we will treat the directions, I mean the direction that point towards the center of the circle as positive, and the direction that point out or away from the center of the circle as negative. So now, we will go through different situations and we will try to learn how to identify the forces that act as our centripetal force in circular motion. So boys and girls, we have the first situations. We might have an object revolve in a horizontal circle with constant speed. Alright, so in order to identify the force or component forces that act as the centripetal force for these situations, we are going to identify first what force is acting on the object. So basically, object have mass, it have weight, because of the gravity downwards, and is attached to a string. So along the string we have tensions. So I draw my free body diagram. Then this will be the center of the circle. So it's a horizontal circle. So in order to perform circular motions, the object must always accelerate towards the center of the circle. So we can see very obviously the tension is the only force that point towards the center of the circle. So the tension will act as our centripetal force. So we write the summation of forces equal to Fc. So the summation of forces along the horizontal component that point towards the center of the circle is the tension. So the tension will be our centripetal force. This centripetal force can relate with the mass and the speed and also the radius of the circle, whereby we have mv squared over r. Then we move on to the second situations. Second situations, we might have a car round a flat curve. Okay, so the car is doing circular motions. It round a flat curve of radius r. So in order to identify what force is acting as the centripetal force that enable the car to round the curve safely, we will identify the force that act on the car first. So the car have weight, so it have weight downwards. The car have mass, so it have weight downwards, and then the tire of the car is in contact with the surface of the road, so perpendicular from the surface of the road we have normal reaction force upwards, and then in order to prevent the car from skidding far away from the center of the circle, between the car and the road is a rough surface, so between the tire of the car and the road there is a frictions, and then the frictions between the tire and the road will prevent the car from skidding away from the center of the circle. So in order to prevent it skidding away from the center of the circle, our friction must act opposed to the tendency of skidding. So our friction will be acting towards the center of the circle. So I put it in free body diagram. So along the horizontal component, the only force is the static friction force, and this force is pointed towards the center of the circle. So the static friction force will act as our centripetal force. So we write the summation of forces equal to Fc. So the net force here that point towards the center, the net force here that point in directions is the friction force. So frictions will be our centripetal force. So we can relate with the mass of the car, the speed of the car, and the radius of the car, whereby our Fc is mv squared over r. So everyone know that, or if you recall the concept we learned about static frictions in topic 4, we know that the static frictions can range from 0 until a maximum value that equivalent to mu Sn. So the required centripetal force or the static friction force in order for the car to make the turn safely is normally equal to the maximum static friction force Fs equal to mu Sn. So, case 3, we have a motion of an object on a record player or turntable. So, this object is doing circular motions. Okay, so to identify the forces that act as our centripetal force, so I have the side view, so it will be easier for us to identify the forces. So, view from the side, this is the center of the circle, and this is our object. So, straight downwards, because of the mass, we have weight put on the surface of the turntable or the record player. We have normal reaction force, and then to prevent the object from skidding away from the center of the circle, between the surface and the object we have frictions, and this friction will be acting towards the center of the circle. So I redraw it into the free body diagram. So we can see very obviously the static friction is the only component force along the x-axis that point towards the center. So summation of force component x equal to Fc. So the static friction force that point in directions will be our centripetal force. So Fs is mv squared over r. Now we move on. The fourth case, we might have a conical pendulum. We have a pendulum bob, we attach to a string, and then it revolve in a horizontal circle. So, identify the forces that act on this object that perform circular motions. So, for sure, it have mass, so it have weight straight downwards, attached to a string, so along the string we have tension. So this tension is acting at an angle theta from the vertical line. So I might resolve the tension into component x and also component y. So you can find out that the component of forces that point towards the center of the circle is t sine theta. Whereas along the y-axis, the t cos theta will be balanced with the weight because we do not have any motion along y-axis. The object only performs circular motion along the x-axis. So now I have two components, so I have to write for two components. So the component of forces that point in directions towards the center of the circle, t sine theta will be our centripetal force. So the t sine theta will be mv squared over r. How about along the y-axis? So along the y-axis, the object do not perform any motions. So we are going to apply Newton's first law for the y-axis. So we have summation force component y will be 0. So t cos theta upward as positive, weight downward as negative. So we have t cos theta minus w equal to 0. So weight is mg, so we move it to the right hand side. So we have get t cos theta equal to mg. Okay, we move on to another cases. We might attach the ball to a string and then we revolve it in a vertical circle. So there is two positions that are quite important for us. So normally we will consider at the top of the circle and also the bottom of the circle. What is the force that acting at that particular position? So let us consider at the top of the circle, we find out that we have weight downward and also along the string we have tension. So put it in form of free body diagrams. So just now we already say trick in direction as positive. So tension and weight both point towards the center of the circle. So we have summation of force along this y-axis equal to the centripetal force in order to cause the circular motions. So we have T plus W equal to mv squared over r. So rearrange, normally we would like to know what is the tension of the string at the top of the circle. So the tension of the string at the top of the circle will be mv squared over r minus mg. The mg will be the weight. Okay. Then we might also consider at the bottom of the circle what happened. So at the bottom of the circle, along the string we have tension, and then straight downward we have weight. So for the positions at the bottom of the circle, we find out that tension is point towards in direction towards the center. So we treat tension as positive, and weight is point away from the center, out from the circle. So weight is pointing out from the circle of from the center. So the weight will be treated as negative. So summation of force along the y-axis, the net force will be the centripetal force. So we are going to have tension minus weight equal to mv squared over r. So basically we would like to know the value of tension when the string is at the bottom of the circle. So we move the weight to the right hand side. We will get tension is mv squared over r plus mg. So you can see obviously at the top position the centripetal force will be minus with the weight of the object. So our tension will become minimum. The tension value will be smaller. But then at the bottom of the circle, our centripetal force will be add to the weight of the object. So at the bottom of the circle, we will find out that the tension will have greater value. So the tension will be maximum at the bottom of the circle. So as the object performs circular motions, as it reaches the bottom of the circle, the tension will be maximum. And then as it goes up, reach the top of the circle, the tension of the string will become minimum. We might also have a situations like roller coaster. Okay, this one. Okay, for example, a car round the loop. A car round the loop. Just like the roller coaster. So this object or the roller coaster is performs circular motion. So once again we would like to know what is the force that acts as centripetal force at the top positions and also the bottom positions. So at the top positions, for the roller coaster or any object that round the loop, it will have weight straight downwards, and then because it's contact with the track or the surface of the loop, so perpendicular outward from the surface of the loop, we have normal force. So I redraw it in a FBD. So at the top positions, I can see obviously both the weight and normal is point in directions towards the center of the circle. So both is treated as positive. So the summation of force along the y-axis is the centripetal force. So we have m plus w equal to centripetal force mv squared over r. Basically, we would like to know the normal force acting on the object at the top position. So we rearrange the equations. Weight, we shift it to the right side. So we have normal reaction force will be mv squared over r minus mg for the top positions. So as the object moves and reach the bottom of the circle, what force is acting? So we have weight straight downward, and then because it's contact with the surface of the loop, so upward we have normal reaction force. So this is our free body diagram for the position at the bottom of the circle. So we find out that normal force is point in directions towards the center of the circle. So we treat normal as positive. Weight is point out from the center of the circle, so weight is negative, so we write the summation of forces. Summation of forces along the y-axis will be the net force, centripetal force. So we have N minus weight is mv squared over r. So we shift the weight to the right side. So we have normal force is mv squared over r plus mg. So boys and girls, at the top positions, we find out that our centripetal force is minus the weight of the object. So because of the minus, the normal reaction force that acting on the object at the top of the circle will be minimum. So the rider of the roller coaster, as it reach the top of the circle, it will feel lighter. So dia akan rasa lebih ringan dan have a kind of feeling that like not safe. Dia macam nak terbang. It's like, oh, it's going to fly away from the roller coaster. Okay? Then what about at the bottom positions? So we find out that at the bottom positions, our centripetal force is add with the weight of the object. So our normal reaction force will become maximum. That's why as the roller coaster or any object around the loop reach the bottom, it will feel heavier and it will have a feeling of safer. Dia akan rasa selamat dekat bahagian bawah ni. Okay? This is how we identify what forces or component of forces that act as the centripetal force. See, every time I will draw the free body diagram and then I will identify what forces is point in direction towards the circle, towards the center of the circle, and also what force is pointing out, away from the center of the circle. We move on. We see another example. Ferris wheel. Yeah, everyone knows Ferris wheel is doing circular motions. So sometimes we are at the bottom. If we ride on a Ferris wheel, and then sometimes we goes up. We are at the top of the Ferris wheel. So we are going to consider what forces will act as our centripetal force when we reach the top of the Ferris wheel and when we reach the bottom of the Ferris wheel. So at the top of the Ferris wheel, we sit on the seat. So upward we have normal, then we have weight straight downwards. So from the free body diagram we draw, we can see very obviously our weight is point towards the center, so we treat weight as positive. Our normal is point away from the center, out of the circle, so we treat n as negative. So summation of forces is the net force, our centripetal force. So we are going to have weight minus n equal to mv squared over r. So again, we would like to know about the normal reaction force that exerted by the seat on the rider. So we rearrange the equations. We have normal reaction force is mg minus mv squared over r. This is for the top positions. Then the Ferris wheel is rotate. So then we will go down and then we will reach the bottom of the circle. So at the bottom of the circle, we still have normal reaction force acting upward and then downward. Because of gravity, we have weight straight downwards. So the force that acting at the bottom will be normal and also the weight. So from the free body diagram, we can see very obviously at the bottom positions, our normal force is the one that point towards into the center of the circle. So our normal reaction force will be positive and weight is now point away out from the center of the circle. So our weight will be negative. So summation of force along the y-axis will be the net force or our centripetal force. So we have n minus weight equal to mv squared over r. So shift our weight to the right side. We have normal force is mv squared over r plus mg. So once again, at the top of the circle, we find out that our weight will be minus with the centripetal force. So the normal reaction force is minimum at the top of the Ferris wheel. At the bottom, at the position bottom of the circle, we find out that our centripetal force will be add to our weight. So our normal reaction force experienced at the bottom of the circle will be maximum. That's why at the top of the circle, because the normal reaction force is minimum, so anyone at the top of the Ferris wheel, it will feel lighter. Dia akan rasa lebih ringan, and then it will feel like it's going to fly off from the Ferris wheel. But then for those at the bottom of the circle, it will, because the normal reaction force is maximum, so the rider will feel heavier and it will be more safe, lebih selamat bila dia tiba dekat bahagian bawah of the Ferris wheel. Okay, so we go to the last one. This one, we have a rotor ride. This one normally at the amusement park. So normally we have a large cylinder spin. So you are thrown and you will find out that as the large cylinder spin, you will be pinned against the wall. Then the floor will be slide out. So, but then you won't fall down. You just like you will be pinned against the wall as the rotor spin, doing circular motion. So for these situations, what force is acting that provide the centripetal force? So as we can see, as the rotor rotate in circular motions, we are pinned against the wall, so we have weight downwards, and then we lean against the wall, so perpendicular outward from the wall, we have normal reaction force. And then in order to prevent us from sliding down, we must have a friction force acting upward. So this is the three forces that acting on a person who pinned against the wall as the rotor rotate. So we can see obviously from the free body diagram, the force that point towards the center of the circle is normal. So for these situations, summation force along x component is equal to the net force, the centripetal force. So the only force that point towards or in the directions to the center of the circle is normal. So the normal force will be our centripetal force. So class, after so many kind of situations, you can see obviously what kind of forces actually act as our centripetal force. It's much more depends on the situations given. So we can't memorize what kind of forces acting as our centripetal force for every different situation. So how we are going to identify the forces that act as our centripetal force? So always bear in mind, first we will draw our free body diagram. Then we identify the force that point in directions towards the center and the force that point out away from the center. Then we will write the summation of forces to identify the net force that act as our centripetal force. So I hope after this video you have get the rough idea, the basic idea, and you have a more clear view on how you are going to identify the forces or the component forces that act as a centripetal force for different situations. Okay? Then with that I end my videos. Thank you for your focus and attentions. I shall see you in others videos next time. Bye bye.